we're going to cover these four common use cases, why Reveille is important to help you manage through these four use cases: transaction performance, application processing, import monitoring, and basically license usage. And Kieran's going to give you a live demo on how we see those things progressing and the actions that we can take to avoid major issues. Okay.
As Bob mentioned, what I'm going to go through are some of the case or use cases that our clients have come to us with. So as Bob showed, we have a whole collection of tests covering all aspects of the Total Agility platform. But what we found is that although they're all required and they ensure that the system is running smoothly, that there are some specific use cases that seem to be recurring, and that our clients come back to us and say, yeah, no, here's one thing that's really important to us. Or even before our clients have used it, they've come to us and said, we need a system that will do this for us. So that really drives exactly how we develop and how we extend our platform. We get use cases, we build out the tests, we build out the resources to cover all of those different scenarios that our clients have. Now, I'll just quickly run through the four use cases. Now I'll get in to show you how we address those. But as Bob mentioned earlier, there's four that we're going to look at today, and that's obviously not the totality of all of the use cases we have. It's just the ones that we see quite often. First one is around transaction performance. So it's really looking at how users interacting with things like Workspace or Designer, how the system is actually performing for them. And when they're encountering problems, how do we know about that as an administrator? The next one we're going to be looking at is application processing. So actually how the system is processing tasks and activities. So looking at things like core work tasks, active threads, thread pool items, locked activities, etc. How we're processing them, and when we aren't processing them correctly, what can we do about that? We'll then move on to look at import monitoring, so how we're getting content into the system, how we're capturing emails, for example. And then finally, we'll look at license use, how we're monitoring license and page count in the background, because again, that's something that we often see, that if it's sort of a surprise to organizations. All of a sudden, their license is saying they're running short, and they've not been aware of that. So how they can get early notifications and how they can see that. So what you can see on the screen at the moment is the Reveille user console, and this is where we do this investigation. This is where we'll go in and we'll start to find out, when things are going wrong. So if we drill down a level, we're getting into the Reveille monitors. And a monitor is really just a structure that looks at a particular part of environment. So you might have a monitor for performance. You might have one for application processing, one for import, one for license use. Or in this case, what we've done is I've put them all in together, and we're having a bad day. We're having a bad day with our Total Agility environment. As you can see there, we've got multiple warnings. And we have an issue with our import connector, our email folder item count. We've got a couple of issues on performance, transaction performance, and looking at core worker locked activities. And we also have one on licensing. Our license count is dropped below a predefined level. Hopefully you won't encounter all of these things at the same time. So this is not a realistic scenario that you're going to have everything in day one and it's all going to appear. But what we're doing here in the demo point of view is I want to show you all of the different use cases and how potentially we can address those. Now, in the background, how we built this monitor out is within the Reveille admin client. And this is where we build out those tests. So if we go in here, we can see the actual tests that are picking up these particular use cases. So if you think about the first one I talked about was transaction performance. Here we can see that test, and we can see that it's issuing out. We have one for worker locked activities. We can also see the email folder item count test and the license page available count. So those are the tests that are flagging up their issues on the system, and they directly are what's shown within the user console here. Now, it's not just about this flagging up and showing within the monitor. What we can also have whenever we encounter one of these issues with one of these use cases is a notification. We can have the ability to have a ticket in the ticketing system telling us something's gone down. We could have an email notification coming through. We could have a text message if required telling us that there's something that we need to do on the system, whether that be we manually do something or whether Reveille automatically does something for us. And I'll come on to that in just a moment. We also have the capability to have a dashboard that's associated with this. So if we go in and look here, we've got a TotalAgility folder, and within this, we've got a TotalAgility performance dashboard. Now, the dashboard really just reflects, it's a visualization of the data we're gathering on each of these different systems. So again, in this instance, I've included all of those use cases within this one dashboard. So here you can see the transaction performance, the import monitoring, the system processing, and the license use. Again, we've got other things within this dashboard as well. If we scroll down here, we can see back-end things like SQL query times, memory usage, disk use, CPU usage. We can look at things like exporting, how long it's taking, or number of searches we've carried out, etc. So we've got a whole load of information on this particular dashboard. But what's interesting, as soon as I get one of these issues that are flagged, I can have the dashboard generated as a report and sent to me. So in that first instance, in that first use case, this transaction performance, we can see here that as these transactions are taking place, we're getting an average time for transaction length. And you can see on this one, I've got a what we call an evaluation against that transaction time. So it tells me if it takes over 2 seconds to run a particular transaction, flag that up. I need to do something about it. And that's exactly what this is doing. It's flagged it up. We can see that within the monitor. So the performance monitor is telling us that there's an issue. And there's a couple of issues, and I'll come on to the second one in just a moment. But it's telling us that we've got that issue. And then we also have the capability to do something about it. So if I go into the admin client and I look at performance, within here, I have what we call proactive actions. So in this case, if I have that transaction, I know that there's an issue with my TotalAgility core services. So in this instance, if I encounter that performance issue, I know that restarting that service will address that issue. It may be temporarily, it might only fix it for a day or two, so it's really only a workaround potentially, but at least it keeps the system running for my end users. So not only now have I been notified that there's a performance issue, I've that's been flagged up with me, a report's come to me and it's shown me that performance issue via email. The system has automatically restarted those core services to ensure that performance issue is addressed. That workaround is deployed, and it provides a resolution to that particular use case. Now, the next one, the TotalAgility application processing, this is around looking at, as I said, things like core work tasks, activity threads, thread pool items, and locked activities. And if we go into our dashboard again, let's go back into our TotalAgility performance dashboard. We can see here on the system processing that we've got those items are being recorded. So our core work tasks, our activity threads, thread pool items, and locked activities. And you can see on the locked activities, again, we're exceeding our threshold. So in this instance, what we want to do is actually, we want to restart the core worker task scheduler. So that allows us to go in, and as soon as we encounter that activity, again, it's flagged within the monitor. So again, if we go into here, it's in the same resource. So the test is running within that same resource, but we can see that there's two issues flagged on this, and this is telling us that the core worker activities has exceeded the predefined threshold. And then again, if we go into the admin client, we can see the action that we're going to take here, which is to restart the core worker task schedule. And it's worth at this point just opening up and having a look at the proactive action, because we can do a lot of different things within this. We have some predefined specific product specific actions within here. We have more generic ones, things like restarting services, restarting processes, etc. And we have very generic ones as well. So we also have the ability to run PowerShell scripts. So you could pretty much write a script to do whatever you wanted to. And as soon as you encounter the issue that you're seeing, then you can run that PowerShell script to automatically carry out a fix or carry out a workaround, whatever's required to fix that particular issue. Now, the next one, the next use case was about import monitoring. So what this is looking for are, the import items. It might look at a folder, it might look at an email folder, it could look at like a system folder, a file folder. But basically what it's looking at is to ensure that if you're ingesting content into a process, that it's being ingested correctly. And in this case, what we can see is that on our import connector, our email folder item count has again exceeded a specific level. So in other words, we would expect the import connector to be pulling those emails in and starting the appropriate process within TotalAgility. But if it fails to do that, or even though if the service looks like it's running, but if it's not processing the emails correctly, we can pick that up because we can get accounts of the items within that folder, and then we can flag if it goes above a certain level. So again, if we go into our performance here and we look at our dashboard for this in the background, we should be able to see on our email monitoring here that that's flagged up. And we can see that we've got a couple of different thresholds for this. So depending on the department, we can break that down into different departments. We can have different thresholds for different areas. But in this instance, we have got it's a minimum level that's been exceeded. So as soon as it goes above that level, we've got that flagged up as well. We can also see here we've got a maximum level, which sort of seems unusual. It's a bit counterintuitive. But what we might want to do is see if the email count is going above a higher level than that. So it's in other words, it's not processed for a longer period of time, or even if it drops below a certain level. So there's no emails coming into that inbox. Again, we can flag those up. We can define so we know exactly what the upper limit should be and what the lower limit should be. And again, on this instance, we provide a notification to the appropriate group. We can also, if we look at this, carry out a restart for the import module as well if required. So again, we're automating that process. If there's a problem, we're anticipating what that is going to be and when it's going to affect the end user. And then if there is a workaround, we're implementing that fix. So the impact to the end user is negligible, if any impact at all. Now, the final one is license use. The final use case is license use. And this is about the page count or station count for TotalAgility. So what's the remaining page count? And if it drops below a specific level, we need to know about that, because what we'll want to do at that stage is raise a ticket to request additional licensing. Licenses, so we ensure that we can keep the process running. We're not running out of license and then scurrying around in the background trying to sort that out before it affects the end users. So again, if we go back through that process, we'll look at the monitor. We can see that that's been picked up. We can see on the licensing that there's the available page count test is flagging that there's an issue. It's dropped below a certain level. Again, if we look at the dashboard here, we can see that license count, and we'll be able to see that the evaluation level, there's one of these for the servers has dropped below that specific level. In fact, there's two that have dropped below that specific level now. So they're flagged up, and it's been flagged up that we need to do that. And again, on the automated job here, maybe just to raise a ticket in a separate system. So it would help if I selected the correct one, but if we select license here, it may be just to raise a ticket. We may just send a notification out to the appropriate team to say they need to raise a ticket, or we can automate that process to put that request in and to send out the request to an external organization to get that ticket, to ensure we can deploy it in time so it doesn't affect those end users. So again, just to go back over what we've covered, the 4 use cases, and let's bring up the monitor so we can reflect back on that as well. What we're looking at is, first of all, we looked at performance, transaction performance, ensuring the system is working in the way we'd expect, and when it doesn't, doing something about that. In that case, it was restarting core services. We looked at application processing, looking at things like core worker tasks, active threads, thread pool items, locked activities, ensuring that they're not exceeding the maximum levels or dropping below the minimum levels. And then if flagging that up if those thresholds were broken, and if required, restarting the core worker task scheduler. We then looked at import monitoring, ensuring all of the different channels were being processed correctly, and if anything wasn't, flagging that up and potentially restarting the appropriate module. In this case, it was the email module. And then finally, the license count. If the page count remaining dropped below a certain level, to flag that in a timely fashion, not the day before the license is due to run out, but in a giving notice well in advance to allow a ticket to be raised either manually or automatically, to request additional licensing for a page count to ensure that the process is not interrupted.